But first, the conflicting opinions about what the Bolt matter means for free speech and racial equality in Australia. A federal court judge has ruled that the Herald and Weekly Times columnist breached the Racial Discrimination Act with articles that discuss the cultural identity of so-called white Aborigines. Mary Gearan takes a look at the complex issues the case has exposed.
A happy group makes its way from a court victory to sweet celebrations in a hotel nearby.
It's a great day for freedom of speech. Hey!
Inside, two leaders of the Indigenous community, brothers Graham and Wayne Atkinson, pondered the end, in theory, of their lifelong need to defend their identification as Aboriginal.
I think this is an historical decision that the court has handed down today. We don't have to prove our identity to anybody.
Since they were boys, the Atkinsons identified themselves as Djadjarung, speaking a distinct language that came from the Camaragunja mission as well as English. But in an article, Herald and Weekly Times columnist Andrew Bolt had written that the brothers were Aboriginal, quote, because their Indian great-grandfather married a part Aboriginal woman.
It's a red letter day for not only Wayne and myself, who have copped it sweet all our lives, but for the younger generation that don't have to cop the same pressure that we have been put under all our lives.
For the man at the centre of the case, there was no repentance, just a grim prognosis for democracy.
This is a terrible day for free speech in this country.
Terrible day for free speech.
Can I at least have my free speech now? It is particularly a restriction on the freedom of all Australians to discuss multiculturalism and how people identify themselves.
Do you agree with Andrew Bolt that it's a sad day for freedom of speech?
Probably, but it's not a sad day for journalists who get their facts correct, because, as I say, I think if Bolt had got his facts correct, he probably would have gotten away with this.
The case was about articles written in 2009.
Meet the white face of a new black race, the political Aborigine.
Andrew Bolt listed a number of people who had, he said, chosen to identify themselves as Aboriginal in order to gain benefits or advantages, when their lighter skin colour meant they had other options open to them.
I certainly don't accuse them of opportunism, even if full-blood Aborigines may wonder how such fair people can claim to be one of them and take black jobs.
But Justice Bromberg of the Federal Court ruled none of the applicants chose to be Aboriginal or used their Aboriginal identity inappropriately. The judge went out of his way to note there can still be a debate about Aboriginal identity. In fact, that debate is happening within Indigenous communities now.
There is an ongoing discussion that people that have done their apprenticeship in the Aboriginal community, like Wayne and myself, we've been involved in Aboriginal affairs all our lives. But people who may realise that they are of Aboriginal descent coming into the community now, of course there's going to be a discussion that will arise out of that. And people would have to sort of show their bona fides that they are really committed to the Aboriginal cause.
There's the manner in which those aspersions are made or judgments are made by people who basically sit back in their armchairs and make those value judgments about people without having any understanding or contact with the group, the community who they are making those judgments about.
So you think, in fact, it's partly about media standards?
Oh, look, I think that's a valid point. We don't want the media being mischievous in not assisting that debate to resolve those sort of issues.
Media analyst Margaret Simons agrees this case may have more immediate implications for journalism than free speech. Mr Bolt admitted during the case he did his research on those he mentioned using the internet and other indirect sources. And the judge ruled the articles wouldn't be covered by the protections of fair comment or public interest because
they contained errors of fact, distortions of the truth and inflammatory and provocative language.
For instance, Andrew Bolt described one of the applicants, Harvard graduate Professor Larissa Behrendt, this way.
Larissa Berendt has also worked as a professional Aborigine, despite looking almost as German as her father. Which people are yours exactly, mein Liebchen?
In fact, Professor Berendt's father is Aboriginal, born of an Englishman.
The law sees itself as having a role in protecting the public, and these words are actually in the judgment, in protecting the public from journalism which is inaccurate. It also is important in its saying that even if you're expressing an opinion, you still have to get the facts right.
Margaret Simon says the verdict leaves many questions unanswered.
The judge makes a number of comments about the nature of the audience and the fact that Bolt is very well read by people who might be susceptible to racial stereotyping, which raises the question of what would happen if he'd written this but was less well read. If he was a blogger, for example, would it be different for a more sophisticated audience?
Professor Adrian Stone, the director of the Centre for Comparative Constitution Studies at Melbourne Law School, is a colleague of one of the applicants but hasn't worked on the case. She agrees that the verdict simply reinforces existing restrictions on the freedom of speech.
What's particularly interesting about them is that you'll find similar provisions in the laws of almost every liberal democracy. In fact, if you put the United States aside, which is highly exceptional in this regard, you see that Australia, in fact, is adopting a very conventional attitude.
In a statement from New York, one of the applicants, artist Bindi Cole, summed up the emotional power of the ruling.
We won, we won. Such a relief and overwhelmingly good. There is free speech, and there is then the responsibility not to hurt or incite hatred within the community. No one doubts Bolt's right to express his views, but his are sometimes misinformed, exaggerated and vicious. He needs to show and take responsibility. What a great day.
We should not insist on the differences between us, but focus instead on what unites us as human beings. Thank you.
Will you apologise for what was in the articles?
There was no apology and as yet no word on an appeal, and probably no end to the debate.
And we invited Andrew Bolt to join the program this evening, but he declined. Mary Gearan with that report.